Hey everyone, and welcome to another video. So I'm very excited today to be officially reviewing Rebel Moon. So I reacted to the trailer a little bit ago, which I'll have as a card here, but yeah, it actually hasn't been too long ago since I reacted to the trailer. Now, when I went into this, first of all, I want to point out that as of the time of recording this, it is December 28th, and Rebel Moon dropped on Netflix not too long ago, so I have actually watched it and am recording my review very shortly after it has been released. But due to the fact that I have a lot of different videos scheduled ahead, I may not be releasing this video until next year, January, February maybe. My cats and dogs are going nuts. Anyway, so I may not be releasing this particular video until January, February, on from there, but I have watched it really soon after it was dropped. So when I saw the trailer, I didn't know if this was going to be a movie or series, so when I started watching it, I didn't know if it was a movie or series. It is December 28th tonight, and last night on the 27th we went to my in-laws and celebrated Christmas with them, and throughout the night they had that playing on the TV, which was further away from where I was, so I couldn't hear anything. I could read the captions and I saw bits and pieces because sometimes things were crazy and chaotic and I couldn't see the TV screen all the time, but I did see bits and pieces of it, and I got super excited for it because, again, I'd seen the trailer and I was planning on watching it, and I've heard the story behind it is Zack Snyder, the guy who created this or directed it, pitched a Star Wars movie idea to Disney or whoever, and they said no. So he went and he made Rebel Moon, so it's like the new Star Wars is kind of what people are quote unquote saying about it and things like that. So I've been very excited for it. So last night, because my husband and I saw bits and pieces of it, tonight when we got home and had dinner, we decided to watch it with my sister, all three of us, and we had a blast. So with that in mind, let's get straight into the review once I deal with my crazy animals. Okay, so without further ado, let's get right into my review. So honestly, I loved this movie. I did go into this not knowing for sure. Even last night when I saw bits and pieces, I thought maybe it was a first episode in a series or something. So tonight when we watched it, I did officially find out it is a movie, and there's another one, a part 2, coming in August of next year, and I'm so excited. I feel like we need more movies like this where it's space fantasy or sci-fi or fantasy, just huge world and huge race building and creativity and creatures and galaxy building and just huge stakes, and just the creativity levels of this is something that I, as an audience member, am missing from current movies and franchises and shows, and just there's a severe lack of creativity. The world building, the race building, the political building, the world building, I mean every type of development that you can do when it comes to the world, the races, the characters, the story, the plot, the world, the cultures, the political landscape, how all of that stuff, I feel like there has been a severe lack of that in a lot of movies and shows to come out, and even Star Wars has really lacked that, because a lot of things today are cut and paste. They're the same thing. They're from one main franchise or another. They're either sequels to a franchise or remakes of past franchises, and it's just the same thing over and over and over again. And with Star Wars, things are just repetitive. There's a lot of agendas going into this with Disney and other big corporations like that just sap the creativity out of it. There were no agendas, there was no political messaging, it was just a story. There was a huge cast of characters. We had strong male characters, we had betrayals, we had really epic villains. They've softened down villains these days too, where villains don't feel bad anymore, especially with Disney and Star Wars and everything. It just feels like Disney itself is afraid to do a good villain anymore, where the villain actually does bad things. So it was nice to have an intimidating villain. It was just really creative. The characters were all three-dimensional. Each character that was in here had a backstory and had a personality and had very distinct qualities that we got to know throughout the movie that just made it really entertaining. And it was a very huge cast of characters that just made it so much fun to watch and enjoy. So it just made it so enjoyable to watch. The stakes were high. I feel like they finally had a movie with high stakes where there were not overwhelmingly amounts of character death, but there was enough that you knew that they were all at risk, that there was a possibility that any one of them could die. And like I said, we had really intimidating villains that made this so fun to watch. And again, the creativity, I cannot gush enough about the creativity of this movie. There were many different races, worlds, cultures, creatures. And this is a non-spoiler review, by the way. There's one scene with a griffin, with a person taming a griffin, and the griffin was just amazing. They had some horse-like creatures that they used to farm with. There were different planets, and they would label the planets. And it had this whole political, like, thing. I could easily see how this was originally supposed to be a Star Wars movie, and so that's where, going into it, I was like, I thought it was going to be a lot more similar and a lot more direct, with just a few things changed so you couldn't copyright it. But so I was genuinely surprised by the level of complexity and how things were different, because while I could see how it could have been a Star Wars movie, there were so many differences that made it stand on its own. And that's the problem that we're running into with like movies and shows these days, is that everything is cut and paste. So either you have a remake or you have a sequel, and it just feels like everything is the exact same thing. Whereas I feel like Rebel Moon, it was inspired by Star Wars, but it did something brand new. Like, if this was a Star Wars movie, it would have taken the franchise into a brand new direction that I feel like Star Wars needed. But I'm glad that it isn't, because it gives us something new to sink our teeth into and to be a fan of. And I actually do genuinely, I don't have any critiques or negatives about this show at all. Like, it was, I just had, not show, but movie. I don't have any negatives or critiques about it at all. And you guys know me, I'm always trying to be fair and point out the good and the bad. I literally can't think of a single bad thing about it. Like, I mean, there was a few scenes where it was partial nudity, and I didn't like that. Like, they didn't show anything, but it was close enough that it could have been. And then it was a little bit violent, but it wasn't like excessive violent. Like, it wasn't enough to bother me. I really don't have any complaints at all, though. Like, I felt like it was real. I don't have any complaints. Like, it was such a good movie. And I personally feel like Rebel Moon is up there on the level of Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, you know, those big epic franchises that have a huge amount of creativity, whether it's sci-fi or fantasy. In this case, I would classify it as like a sci-fi fantasy, like sci-fi first, fantasy is the subgenre, but it does have elements that are more fantastical and fantasy in nature than sci-fi, but it is still on that level of huge, big, epic franchise with a huge amount of creativity, huge amount of world and race building and culture building and planet building. So I would classify it as like on the level of Star Wars and Lord of the Rings in that aspect. And it just, I fell in love with it, and I feel like it's a brand new thing to just love and enjoy. So with that in mind, I really this review is really short, but I genuinely can't think of a single thing that actually bothered me. I loved the creatures. Like I said, they have these horse-like creatures. They had the griffin-like creature. There was a moment with the griffin and the person taming it, and they got forehead to forehead, and he was talking to the griffin in the language, and it was such a beautiful moment. And then there were some epic action sequences, like the action. I felt like it was a good balance between the journey and getting the people that we need, and then the action sequences in between there, which were super action-packed and fun. And there's another sequence where the person's riding the griffin, and like it was almost like an Assassin's Creed moment in a huge jump. That's in the trailer. Some of it is out of context. There's another epic fight later, and so it's just super creative. There was the Drider. I remember reacting to this in the trailer, and the Drider, that whole sequence was so cool. And just, I remember reacting in the trailer, just the scale and the creativity of it. I could tell this was going to be super creative and fun, and it was definitely not, it did not let me down. In fact, it exceeded my expectations. And then can I also just say that the visuals, the directing, the acting, all of the actors, there's some big time actors in this. There was the first, from Game of Thrones, the first Daro Naharis character, Eric, I can't think of his last name, but the actor's name is Eric something. And then a couple seasons into it, they changed actors for the Daro character, and that guy was also in there. So both actors who played Daro Naharis from Game of Thrones are actually in this. There was the guy from Pacific Rim, I think he's from. There's also the main, he's an African-American actor who was in Gladiator, and he's in, I think he's in The Scorpion King. I mean, he's in like everything. He's a huge big time actor. I did feel like I knew the main chick from somewhere, but I can't think of where I know her from. I'm gonna have to look her up. So the cast is huge, and more than that, the acting level is so believable and realistic, and it was just so, like, they did such a good job. But then the directing, the visually, the world, like the looking at it, like watching, like just the visuals is so stunning and beautiful. Like, I couldn't even tell any of it was CGI. The Drider, the makeup, it looked amazing. There were several different alien-like creatures in there. I also, one thing that I did appreciate, and this is where Star Wars is severely lacking, is the lasers. Like, the laser guns in this thing do damage. They are so realistic with, if you get hit by a laser gun or a lightsaber like thing, there's damage there. In Star Wars, you can get stabbed in the gut and just not even die, be perfectly fine. Lasers can hit you and you're just perfectly fine. So honestly, the Disney Star Wars, the lasers literally mean nothing anymore, whether it's like the lasers from a blaster or a lightsaber, and that irritates me so much because it's not realistic at all. And I do admit that current Star Wars, no matter whether you're talking about the Book of Boba Fett or the Ahsoka show even, it's just Disney Star Wars feels like childish and really, really dumbed down, and the bad guys don't feel bad. And this is true for all of Disney content. Like, they don't do good villains anymore. The villains don't do anything bad because everybody has to be redeemed, and the villains can't be bad because Disney's so afraid to offend anybody. It's like, that's the point of a villain, is because they do bad things, like, duh. And like the Empire and the Stormtroopers, like, it's not intimidating. It's just, and like, when you get a franchise like this, they did have an Empire like thing called the Mother, oh my gosh, what was it? The Mother Empire, I can't remember. The Mother, oh my gosh, I can't even think of the name of it. I just watched the movie, but it's like the Mother something, and that's basically the big empire that's like this royal empire that's conquering worlds and stuff. Oh my gosh, there was one ship that went to this farming world, and this one ship is such a huge threat, and that's the whole point of the movie, is gathering the people and the resources and what we need to defeat this single ship. And in Star Wars, it's like, you just beat it so easily. And I admit that, like, I'm a huge fan of Star Wars Rebels, but like every episode, it's like they defeat multiple types of starships that are supposed to be big and intimidating, and it's just like, I don't know, there's just a different level of, and I feel like Star Wars, live action Star Wars, like when you're talking about Star Wars Rebels, it's directed at kids, so that gets a pass. But the live action shows like Book of Boba Fett, Ahsoka, Mandalorian, like Mandalorian season 1 was really good, season 2 was pretty good, season 3 not so much. So the Book of Boba Fett, Obi-Wan Kenobi show, Ahsoka show, you get all these live action Star Wars shows that are supposed to be good, not directed at children, and they just suck. Like, they don't suck, but it's just like, there's no creativity. It's all cut and paste. The Empire and the bad guys are not intimidating. The villains are not intimidating. You're trying to get OP Mary Sue characters, like female empowerment, like Rey and stuff like that, and it's just like, there's politics inserted into it and everything else, and it's just like, oh, and Reva like took the place of Obi-Wan Kenobi, and it took the place of like the development between Kenobi and Vader. But no, the Rebel Moon is just a good movie, you guys, and it is a good sci-fi fantasy movie. And if you really love the big epic scale fantasy, like sci-fi or fantasy style stuff with lots of world building and lots of characters and political stuff mixed with super action-packed scenes and epic visuals, emotional scenes, really, really, really good character development, then Rebel Moon is for you. Like, if you're a Star Wars fan who has left the fandom or is thinking about leaving the fandom or is frustrated with where Star Wars is, then this movie is for you. If you love Lord of the Rings style stuff, if you are a fan of just big, gigantic sci-fi fantasy stuff like that, then Rebel Moon is for you, and I highly recommend it to everybody. I have no bad critiques on it at all. Like, this was amazing, fantastic, I loved it so much. What did you guys think of it? Let me know in the comments below. If you liked this video, please be sure to give it a like and subscribe for more writing and reading videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And if you liked my review of Rebel Moon, then check out my reaction to the trailer, because that honestly blew my mind and it's so fun. So check it out. You really don't want to miss my reaction to the trailer.